Adale Kiamie was a native of Syria. She was 16 years old when she was aboard the Titanic. Her father, Najib, who was a well-established mercantile in Syria, immigrated to the United States in 1908 to establish a more secure business for him and his family. He promised to bring his family along once his affairs were settled, and he established a base for his business. Years of hard work paid off for Najib, and in 1912, he was building the basis for a silk and textile production plant in New York City. He requested that Adale should travel to America. He sent a certificate called the I card, stating that she was 16 years old and traveling with another family to join her father in New York. He also gave specific instructions for Adele to bring Istanbul tobacco, complaining that it was too expensive in America. He also asked that she bring staples of Arabic food and carpets. It was finally time for Adele to see her native village for the last time, in what is today the small village of Hardin, Lebanon. She was accompanied by family friend Latifa Backlin and her 3 children on the challenging and long journey. The entourage traveled to Beirut by carriage, then sailed to Marseille, France, where one of the Backlini girls developed conjunctivitis, causing the travel plans to be changed. After the infection had cleared, they left and heard of the extraordinary and grand Titanic, and that it was being advertised as the safest ship. It wasn't in their travel plans to be on the Titanic, but since it was hailed as the safest ship, they purchased their third-class accommodations. On the night the Titanic struck an iceberg, Adele and the Backlinis arrived on the deck. Adele decided to go back and try to rescue the belongings and the goods that her father had asked to bring along. She was held up on her way back by the crew, who refused what she was carrying and threw it all away. Adele was eventually permitted back to the deck to find chaos among the passengers. Eventually, amid the rushing and running, she saw the Backlinis on the collapsible boat C, but it was too late. The lifeboat had already been boarded. Latifa yelled that there was still room on board, but she was yelling in Arabic, and the crew didn't understand, and there was nothing they could do. Adele was afraid of falling into the water if she jumped onto a lifeboat. Also, she had seen several boats overturn and feared the same would happen to her. Adele stood on the deck, crying, scared, not knowing what would happen next. Suddenly, Adele felt herself being picked up and placed in a lifeboat. John Jacob Astor saw Adele standing alone, frozen in terror, without family around her. He carried her in his arms and threw her into the lifeboat, giving her his seat. He told his wife to care for the frightened girl, who did not speak English. Mrs. Astor took off her coat and covered her. She would often check on Adele to make sure she was okay. Adele would eventually be rescued by the crew of the Carpathia, and she was treated at St. Vincent's hospitals for shock, exposure, and she was eventually reunited with her father. Adele would go on to marry a fellow Lebanese immigrant. They'd have 2 children together, before dying from skin cancer at the young age of 27. The Titanic's wealthiest passenger, John Jacob Astor, who would not survive the sinking, but many stories would be told about his heroics on board that ship. He was seated in the lifeboat when he saw that by being saved, he would be taking the place of one of the women. He returned to the Titanic, where he would eventually meet his fate. The Kiamie family prayed for John Jacob Astor for many years after his death, a man who had everything to live for and gave it all up for an innocent, terrified young girl that he didn't even know.